So you may have seen earlier in our show, we made a video talking about Pittsburgh Penguins forward Ville Koivunen, a guy who just signed an 8-year contract extension, which takes him until 2034. The issue that many had with this 8-year contract, it's the fact that Koivunen has only played 47 NHL games. Now, to be fair, he has had 14 points in those games, but this is a guy who is still fresh, brand new to the National Hockey League, and now he is signed on the payroll till 2034? Kyle Dubas is obviously seeing a miracle in this contract, or else he would not have signed it. And with that in mind, we have to start thinking about other players that could be getting 8-year deals too. I wanted to refer your attention to this article posted by Eric Cruikshank on thehockeynews.com. I really like this conversation that he proposes on the website, so the link is going to be down there in the description. Cruikshank decided to write about 5 NHL players who could sign 8-year extensions before time runs out. Now, what does that mean? Time runs out? Well, Ville Koivunen, he got the 8-year extension with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but with that in mind, the NHL does have an incoming change to maximum contract lengths, and that's now into focus here. Starting September 16th, 2026, under the new CBA, the maximum allowable term for player contract extensions will drop from 8 years to 7 years. That rule applies for players under team control, while free agent maximums will decrease from 7 years to 6. For teams that are looking to lock up promising young players for that additional 8th season, the clock is ticking. Yeah, the clock is ticking indeed. Looking at you, Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, Zeev Buium. Either way, with the Ville Koivunen extension in the back of our minds, let's dive into some of these names that Cruikshank talks about. I wanted to focus on the Canadiens and the Red Wing guy. We've got Marco Kasper that's listed in this piece, as well as Zachary Bolduc. Starting out this piece, though, Cruikshank writes about Adam Fantilli, a guy that, if we're being real, he's a part of that new generation where if he does not sign an 8-year extension, I honestly wouldn't be too surprised. Like Connor Bedard, Celebrini, Leo Carlson, Fantilli is right in that mix, and sure, he may be the 4th out of 4 guys if you look at that grouping, but Fantilli is still very much in it. He could have that Jack Eichel-like later career resurgence, where after years of not really being on the best team, Eichel found himself as a Stanley Cup champion and getting 90 points a season. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that Fantilli is going to force his way out and get a surgery that the Columbus Blue Jackets don't want him to get, but he is good enough where he can be that 90-point guy. At least that's what I think. Let's go out there and read what Cruikshank writes about when it comes to Marco Kasper of the Detroit Red Wings. The Dylan Larkin saga could have a ripple effect throughout the Red Wings organization if his trade request comes to fruition. With a big hole potentially left at the center position in his absence, Marco Kasper suddenly emerges as a candidate to land a long-term extension. The Austrian center saw a steep decline in offensive production during his sophomore season, scoring only 9 goals and finishing with 19 points after potting 19 goals and 37 points the season prior. That drop-off could create some reasonable concerns for the next GM in Detroit and impact their willingness to commit to an 8-year deal. However, the Red Wings might be in a position where they need to make bets on young players they already have in order to become relevant in the Atlantic. There is enough talent to salvage this competitive window that the Red Wings have been building towards, with or without Larkin. If the organization believes Kasper's latest season will only be a blip in his upward trajectory, an 8-year deal at a reasonable cap hit could pay off in spades. Now, that's the key word. Could. It could pay off. Marco Kasper this previous season dipped so bad in point production, and just thinking about what he was able to do in his rookie season, going from 19 goals and 37 points to 19 total points with more games played obviously is a negative sign. That is, even though the Red Wings were a really good team for like 75% of the season. Yes, the team totally crumbled towards the end there, but Marco Kasper, whether the Wings were good or not, wasn't that much of a factor compared to what he had done the previous year. Now, I'd say the good thing about this is, usually for players who have sophomore slumps, the third season will be such a defining year for the rest of their careers that it almost makes me think that the right move is to wait until the season is over and then reevaluate. But then again, that goes out of the September deadline for 8-year contracts. If the Red Wings GM, whomever that may be, decides that, this season that Kasper just had is just a one-and-done sophomore slump that's going to totally be rebounded from. Kasper's going to be back to 25, 30-goal potential over the next few years, and he'll get 50 to 60 to 70 points a year. Then okay, signing a guy like Kasper to the Ville Koivunen special, $4 million a year till 2034, that sounds like a great idea. But it's a gamble. That's all this is at the end of the day. Signing 8-year contracts for guys who are coming off of bad seasons is going to be a gamble. Now, when it comes to the Red Wings, I understand that there are some conversations about the necessity of guys like Kasper long-term, especially with the kind of talent the team has drafted over the years. These sort of low ceiling, high floor kind of guys. Guys that'll definitely be NHL players into the long haul, but guys that may not necessarily have that upper echelon of performance within their body of work by the time their careers are said and done. Nate Danielson, Kasper, Brandstad Newgard are almost all kind of the same guy, just different heights and different positions in Brandstad Newgard's case. But either way, Marco Kasper, if he does pan out to being a top-line center, which I don't want to say is guaranteed, but I also don't want to say I think is realistic. I don't know. This guy just screams 60, 70 point second-line center to me. Either way, getting somebody like that long-term, $4, $5, $6 million a year even, sounds like a pretty good bet if he actually does fulfill it. You could say the same thing about the Montreal Canadiens guy that is written about in Cruikshank's article. It's Zachary Bolduc out of the Montreal Canadiens. The Habs have already shown this summer they aren't afraid to commit to the maximum term, signing rookie phenom Ivan Demidov to an 8-year, $73 million extension. The series of team-friendly contracts the Canadiens have put together has them built for success in the short and long term, and they could get another deal of similar stature done with Bolduc. After being traded from the Blues on July 1st, 2025, the 23-year-old turned in a solid first season with the Canadiens, potting 12 goals and finishing with 30 points in a depth role. An 8-year extension with a salary in the range of $4 million for Bolduc would certainly fit in line with the team-first approach that the Canadiens players have seemingly bought into. Although, as the season approaches and he remains without a contract, things will need to materialize quickly. Now, the exact same thing needs to be brought up here for Zachary Bolduc. Do you believe in this guy? 30 points, 78 games, that's great. He had 7 points in 19 games in the playoffs. That's also pretty great. But the problem with Zachary Bolduc, despite the fact that he actually did have a really good showing in the first round against Tampa Bay, is the fact that Bolduc started the year out super hot. He had scored 3 goals in 3 games to open up the season, which included 4 points in the matter. But from 3 goals in 3 games, he ended up scoring 9 goals in the remaining 75 games he had played afterwards. So much for a guy that was touted as a top-tier goal scorer with an underrated shot on the power play. Bolduc just did not use it. And sure, there was the odd multi-goal game here and there, the multi-point game here and there. There were stints where Bolduc was genuinely a demon, going out there and scoring points like crazy, but he's so streaky, and he wasn't really given a top spot on the Canadiens to succeed. You just have to hope that if he becomes that second-line winger to play with Ivan Demidov long-term, you just hope he's able to show it quicker, rather than what he had shown towards the end of the season, because at some point, Alexander Zhuravsky's going to come knocking on that door, and he's going to be given that spot, dooming Zachary Bolduc to third-line prosperity for the rest of his career. Now, I think the idea of signing him to a long-term deal worth $4 million a year has a much higher payoff than what Marco Kasper could potentially accomplish if you were to do the same thing. I just think Zachary Bolduc's body of work is a little bit better. But the question is, do you think Bolduc or a Marco Kasper could be a reasonable 8-year target for Montreal's GM and Detroit's GM? What are your thoughts on what they do in the future? Would you rather make that bet? Let's say $4 million a year for Bolduc long term, $5.5 million a year for Kasper because he's a center, and also a little bit more polished than Koivunen? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Kasper, Bolduc, the Koivunen deal, and the 8-year contract extension? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.